Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Executive. So excited to have Rob Carpenter here with us today.
Appreciate it.
CEO and co-founder of Valiant AI, which is building the world's first customer service AI designed for existing retail hardware.
Yep.
So you may be, next time you go and order something from like a Burger King or something, you could be ordering from your technology.
Yeah, that's it.
Really cool. Well, tell us about Valiant AI. How did it all start and what are you guys building?
Yeah, so probably one of the more interesting companies that you're likely to hear about. The initial idea for the company was actually holograms. So early on, I identified that there's a huge problem in the market in the sense that there is a ton of unfilled positions when you look at retail, right? I mean, nobody has to be a genius to go to a restaurant and realize that they are understaffed, they're closing hours, they can't run. Haircut places are dealing with it, hospitals, I mean, all of these different kind of frontline facing spaces. And so the core idea is like, how can you take something like robots, if you think about manufacturing, right, automating tasks within those spaces, but bring it to something that has normally been the domain of humans?
Yeah.
So we really felt like AI had hit a crossroads where it could actually start to do that type of work. So what we had was a transparent OLED display, think a piece of glass merged with a flat screen TV, and we actually rendered a 5.5 foot tall digital person. And we called her Holly, and she blinked her eyes, she shifted weight on her feet, she would lean in when she was talking. And the visual experience was very cool. But what we found out was the actual conversational component was super clunky. So we were trying to use off-the-shelf tech from Google, Amazon, Watson. This was 2017, 2018, and just none of the tech was good enough. It was a prototype. You could see where this tech could go, but it wasn't capable of delivering this almost human-like experience. So I realized early on that if I was ever going to bring this hologram to market, first I was going to have to be able to figure out conversational AI. So pivoted the business, as so many startups do, and we've spent the last 4 years now building what we believe is the best conversational AI platform on the market. Our initial focus is restaurants and specifically drive-thru. So you pull into a Burger King and an AI instead of a person says, hey, welcome to Burger King, can I take your order? Our conversational AI system carries on a conversation. It understands context through the entire order. Anybody that's familiar with conversational AI, we take 15 to 30 turns to complete the order, and we try to do all of that in about 60 seconds.
Wow.
So wicked hard, super fun, and just enjoy being on the front line of, revolutionizing a new technology.
And when you were using, the Apple or, maybe it was Amazon's technology, was that like the Siri or Alexa basically? They have that technology you can use?
Yeah, so you can plug into their services and they have APIs and SDKs that you can use to get direct access to it, and it's a lot of that similar type of technology. So one of the key areas that we looked at with those companies was around ASR, or audio speech recognition, and right now where we are today, we're at about a 90% ASR accuracy rate, and for comparison, Google and Amazon are about 71 and 72%.
Wow.
Last time we tested Watson, it was like 25%. Wow. And so that was really why we felt like we had to build our own technology, and the current off-the-shelf technology just wasn't good enough, because if you miss 3 out of every 10 words, you are absolutely going to mess up the conversation.
Right, and most people have that experience with the customer service bot.
Yeah.
That's like you're constantly putting in wrong things, so eventually you get to the actual human being.
Yeah.
How do you...
0, 0, 0, 0, 0.
Right, until you get to a human being. How do you, get away from that, where people are like, I can actually... this feels like a human conversation.
You help people, and you actually do what they're trying to do. I mean, the reason those kinds of systems suck, basically, is that you're forced to go through these decision trees. Press 1 for this, press 2 for this. And like, you really just want, if it's a computer, something to pick up the phone and say, hey, thanks for calling Bank of America. What do you need? And you could be like, hey, why was $50 debited from my account? And the system could be like, oh, well, this transaction occurred, right? Like, okay, end of story. You got to what you needed in 10 seconds. It wasn't, okay, press 1 for English, press 2 for Spanish, and you press 1. Okay, now press 1 for consumer banking, press 2 for business banking, right? Like, it's time consuming and it's exhausting. You know what you want, get me to the person that can solve my problem for me quickly. And that's what conversational AI does, which is vastly different than a Siri or Alexa, and also vastly different from the IVR systems that we've all been forced to use over the last 30 years.
Because you're going back and forth.
Yeah, it's just an open-ended conversation. If the AI is smart enough, if me and my team do our job, anything in the relatively reasonable domain that you want to communicate to the AI, it should understand you within milliseconds.
Wow. So you're doing this in called drive-throughs.
Yep.
Obvious use case. Would that go into an Amazon, Alexa or Siri eventually? They would want your technology because it's more accurate?
If we're talking about kind of the roll-up to multiple industries, taking a product like Alexa and going from a kind of kitschy consumer device to an actual like enterprise mission critical, I do think that's the way the industry will go, is that there's companies like us that we compete with in restaurants, and there's companies our size in 100 other industries. All of us are fairly siloed. And so I think eventually you'll see 1 to 2 competitors emerge in every single key industry. And likely at that point, there probably will be a roll-up. Could be the bigger guys, could be existing players that just roll people up on their own. So
Really
there's a couple of different ways it can play out.
And before you did this, you had started App Adventures,
Yeah.
a software development company.
Yep.
I'm sure you learned a lot of lessons from doing that.
I think I got some scars
Yeah,
around here somewhere.
clearly I see a lot of scars. What lessons are you taking from that into this now with Valiant AI?
Yeah, so App Adventures was a wonderful experience. I started that in my spare bedroom, grew it to 30 employees, 7 figures in revenue. When I was working on my MBA, I always really liked the idea of mergers and acquisitions. So I actually went out and acquired my first company in Hyderabad, India, because
No
it
kidding.
can't be too easy. And so why not acquire a company on the other side of the world?
Right,
I mean,
let's
I
make it harder.
literally had
Let's make it harder.
paperwork rejected because I used the wrong color ink on a form. So it wasn't a quick, streamlined process, but it turned out to be a great acquisition. Followed that on, acquired another company in London, and so I started to build this global custom software development company. In the 6 years that I ran it, we built and launched 350 custom software applications. So when you're in this sort of service-based business, you're always out trying to look for and bring in new customers. And so for me personally, I got very good at conceptualizing ideas, refining, prototyping, building, launching, scaling. And I was able to use all of those learnings, knowledge, as well as the industry connections that I made, and now parlay that into Valyant, which is a product-based company.
Very cool. And what do you, as a second-time founder, what do you think you have to get right early on that's so important and critical as a founder?
I think culture is always a key thing, because people ultimately at the end of the day are what run every company. And so I think being able to find the right people, the right butts in the right seats, I think is how the kind of phrasing goes, is really important. You have to be good at selling people on the vision.
Yeah.
And so for you as the entrepreneur or owner, I think having a way to convey an excitement for the business that convinces employees to come join you, that convinces investors to fund you, customers to hire you, vendors to partner with you, it plays a really important role in growing and building and scaling a company. And companies are never linear. It doesn't matter who you are or what company you are, there's twists and turns and bends. And so you need to have a group of people around you that are flexible and kind of willing to be on that ride with you. And I think culture goes a long way to kind of helping those bends and those twists.
And when you're interviewing people, it's obviously a little bit different at startup. What are you really looking for to make sure that they're the right cultural fit for what you're trying to achieve early on?
Yeah, so where we are right now at about 30 employees, I'm kind of in a nice place where I actually don't tend to be the final decision maker on hires. I do tend to do a lot of the first interviews, and I interview for culture. Is this person somebody that I would want to be in the trenches with? If things get really, really hard, can I rely on this person? Will this person lift me and others up, or are they going to bring everybody down? I did have an experience in Appet where it was a younger employee, and through a couple of things, just became very, disinterested in the company and really just started to bring everybody down, was super negative. Nobody was enjoying the experience. And, that was ultimately an employee, had to move out of the company, and then that kind of helped to sort of lift and levitate the experience. So making sure that, at all times you have the right kind of people within the company to manage wherever you are in your life cycle is super important.
Well, the phrase, hire slow, fire fast comes
Yeah.
to mind, but it's really hard to do in practice.
So much easier said than done.
So much easier said
right?
than done, right? Because you feel responsible. You hired that person on.
Yeah.
To get them to
You
succeed.
sold them on the vision.
Right.
They might have left another company to come join
Right.
you, left the safety of maybe a bigger organization to come try a startup. Absolutely.
And to make that decision to let them go, you just have to rip the Band-Aid off at
Right.
a certain point, right?
Yep.
And be honest with yourself.
Yep. Yeah. It's a painful process. I do think that's something that gets easier when you've run other companies.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it ever gets real easy. I mean, it depends on your personality. I think some CEOs, maybe to their own mental health benefit, can be a little more just sort of focused on the company and the mission, and people come and go and they don't worry about it. I think I probably tend to be on the slightly more empathetic scale.
Yeah.
So it does make it harder. It doesn't mean that it doesn't still have to be done. And it's just part of the trade-offs of being a CEO. You know, there's a reason why they say, you know, startups are not for the faint of heart.
Right.
And these are the types of things that contribute to that. And once you let somebody go, or maybe you're facing layoffs for one reason or another, right? You know, at the point we're in June of 2022 right now, market's going south. You're seeing tech companies all across the spectrum that are laying people off. How do you then deal on day one after that with everybody that remained? Do they stay? Do you get a ton of defections of people that you didn't actually want to lose, but now they've lost confidence in the business?
Yeah.
I mean, it is a tremendous amount that you have to manage around kind of hiring and firing employees.
Yeah, you're balancing so many things as the leader.
Yep.
So where do you with your week, where are you putting your focus? You know, how do you manage everything?
I mean, I think for me, I've because I come from more of like the sales business side, instead of being more of a kind of engineer tech focused founder, I really focus on three really key things in my kind of day to day at any given time. Number one, culture. You know, is my team having a good time? And not just having a good time, but are they obviously doing the work that they're supposed to do? Is everybody, you know, getting along? Is the company moving forward? Those types of things. So culture is super critical. You know, historically, in the 4 or 5 years I've been running this company now, we've averaged about a 5% turnover rate, which is really good. So I think I've done a decent job in terms of managing the culture of the company. Secondary then comes along, again, for me as more of kind of a business focused founder, is sales. So I focus pretty heavily on sales. And within our drive-through AI technology, you know, we have Checkers and Rallies as a customer. We're expanding. We're close to converting to a customer, a 3,000 unit chain.
Wow.
And then we have a 25,000 and a 40,000 unit chain lined up behind those two. So sales is also a really critical element for me, my kind of second. And then my third is then investors.
Okay.
We're in deep tech. It's hard. I compare to what we're doing to like self-driving cars. It's not as hard as that, but there are a lot of similarities in terms of the technology, deep tech, the time it takes. AI in general is challenging. So investors, in my opinion, are very key to especially early stage AI companies and getting to that point where you're now on a ramp where you can be on sort of more institutional trajectory. So culture, customers, investors are really the three key things in any given week that I focus on as a CEO.
And on the investor front, we're at the Colorado Venture Summit.
Yeah.
We're connecting, you know, investors and entrepreneurs. We have a lot of those conversations.
Yep.
You know, what brought you to this event and what's so great about it?
I mean, I've been in and out of the Denver entrepreneurial system now for a decade.
Yeah.
So I just love this space. A lot of these people that are here, I've known them for 5 or 10 years. I'll give David Gold a quick shout out from Access Venture Partners. He was actually the very first investor that I pitched on Valyant when it was just, you know, a gleam in my eye, basically. So, you know, it's fun to catch up with people like that and chat through. And David's had his own cool journey of going out and being a founder of a company, obviously a luminary in the Denver space for investments, you know, and then being able to catch him up on kind of my own fun journey since when we first met, I think almost 5 years ago at this point. And so I think there's you know, one of the cool things about Colorado being a slightly smaller ecosystem from a startup entrepreneur investor standpoint is you almost get a little bit of like a kind of familial feel between everybody. So I'm having a great time so far.
And is you know, we're obviously in kind of a mess economically, or you could say, right? And so it's an interesting time to fundraise.
It's a train wreck, and you're still seeing the trains flying off the rails. Like nobody.
That's the way to say it.
Yes. Which one of these is
honesty.
careening into a city, and which one of these will just flop onto the side?
Right.
We have no idea.
Yeah, it's important not to look at the news. But
Yeah.
So how do you know, fundraise in this environment? You know, does that change the way you pitch, that you sell the vision, or do you try to kind of put the noise aside and keep focused on what you would have said before?
Yeah, obviously have to stay focused, but I do think, you know, I can talk about my business particularly, you do have to be sensitive to what's going on, and you have to be very ready to make changes when changes need to be made. again, I don't know when people will be listening to this, right? So we're June 2022. Up to about 60 days ago, you really saw, probably in my opinion, some of the last frothy SPACs.
Yeah.
Between what they're talking about on the Hill, between what they're talking about right now at the SEC, there's a very good chance SPACs as they've existed for the last few years are dead. And they are going to be forced to a more traditional IPO type role. And I think that's going to fundamentally kind of alter how frothy these SPACs have been. And maybe for the better. I mean, a significant, was it like 80% right now are trading below the price at when they went public.
Right.
Some of those are probably going to die. And you just generally don't expect by the time a company goes public that it needs to issue going concern warnings.
Right.
So I think there's challenges. And so because over the last 60 days, this SPAC market has effectively collapsed, you're seeing companies that, let's call them Series D, who would have been on a trajectory to go public traditionally or through a SPAC in the next 12 months are suddenly going, wow, that's not an option for me. And they're going to raise money, but because they can't go public, the people that would fund you right before public don't necessarily want to fund you. So then what are you doing? You're competing with the Series C guys. What are they doing? Because now the Series D guys are taking all their money. The Series C women are now going and competing with the Series B people, and then Series B is going and competing with Series A. So you're seeing sort of a waterfall effect. And if you're sitting in the seat of a VC, you're probably saying, let's see what happens over the next 90 days.
Yeah, let's see how it plays out.
Let's see how this thing plays out. And then, where we're at, which is kind of a Series A phase, if you're the VC, you're saying, okay, this Series A has got a lot figured out. They're further along than a seed stage company, but they're still a bit risky. Oh, here's this Series B company that's now going to do a flat round. So it's maybe borderline a sequel to their initial Series A, but their product fit is way deeper. Well, I'm going to invest in this quasi Series B company, right? And that's now taking funds away from the Series A company. So what I think there's no question, at least in the next 6 to 12 months, that we're going to see valuations, I don't want to say are going to collapse, but I think everybody should expect to see them go down by 50% at minimum.
Drastic.
It's immediately going to affect the amount of cash that gets infused into the business. So companies like mine and others that are in my stage, I think we need to get more comfortable with lower valuations and less capital that we're going to get. And to your question specifically, how does that affect me? I need to now transition from grow at all costs, which is what the market was over the last 2 or 3 years. Hey, you've got a blue sky opportunity, go grab everybody under the sun that you can get and try to get as deep as you can. Don't worry about your unit economics, figure that out later.
Yeah.
That's kind of going out the window. Now it's like, ooh, we don't know when you're going to be able to raise or how much you're going to be able to raise. You need to get your unit economics figured out. And so I think there's going to be a big shift in the market. You'll probably see slower growth. You'll definitely see companies die. I've got 5 to 6 key competitors. I think 2, probably at minimum, will not make it out of this alive. And so the messaging I'm getting from my investors is like, double down on the product, make sure your customers are happy, get your unit economics to a place that are break even or profitable, which is hard for AI companies.
Yeah.
Be prepared for this to take a minimum of 12 months. Make sure you have 12 months of runway. If you don't have 12 months of runway, do whatever you can to make your current cash last 12 months. And there's only a couple of obvious ways to do that. So I think for a lot of entrepreneurs right now, it's a very interesting environment as they try to feel their way through all of this.
Totally. And as we start to wrap up, what would your advice be, for founders in this environment, as you've also been through, with
A
Apple
couple.
Ventures, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's your kind of just general advice for other founders that are in your position?
I think that the advice is different based on the stage.
Yeah.
So if it's in my position, then it's definitely whatever cash you have on hand, make it last 12 months. If you don't have the ability to make it last 12 months, do whatever you can to make your unit economics look good, strike whatever deals you can to get as many big name customers on board, and then go, and you're probably not gonna be able to raise money for the next 90 days, but then hit it hard in 90 days and be ready to take a lot less capital at a much lower valuation. I'm sure a ton of companies are gonna do at minimum flat rounds. There's probably gonna be a bunch of down rounds. Manage expectations around that, because it's way easier when somebody has a heads up on it versus when you surprise them at the last minute.
Right.
And then lastly, if you're just looking to get started and build your product, it's not necessarily a bad time to do it. I think seed, at least for the next few months, will probably still be happening, but then that kind of frost could reach the seed stage. There's a lot of tech layoffs right now, so if you're a very intelligent individual, or in my case, moderate intelligent person, but you're motivated,
Right, yeah. Hardworking.
Yeah, hardworking, exactly. Good at hiring smart people
Right.
to make up for my deficiencies. I would still stay, go after it. Maybe it's going to take you a little longer to get to a point where you can raise capital, but if that allows you to focus on the product for longer and then build something that ideally can get market traction with good unit economics as soon as possible. In either case of startups or kind of early stage venture companies, a lot of really big, really amazing companies are still going to come out of the space. And if you can survive, you're probably coming out with fewer competitors, and hopefully better unit economics on top of it.
That's really interesting. Capital efficiency, ton of focus, a lot of hard work.
Yep.
I love it. Rob, this was fun. Really excited about what you're building with Valiant AI. And hopefully in a couple of years, we'll see what you've built and you'll be in a bunch of stores already.
Awesome, man. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
Yep, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.